What's the worst business decision you've ever seen? In my hometown, there was an independent fast food and homemade ice cream place. Long established and run by close friends. It was a goldmine. They decided to sell and retire. New owners immediately changed everything. Removed some attractions on the grounds, changed the 60-year-old menu, and switched the commercially made ice cream. They lasted 8 months. I mean, it is kind of a shame when a lot of people think that just because something seems very old and outdated, that it needs to be reworked and redone. I think that it's kind of nice having things that are just old and historical. The property management company I used to work for had a number of student properties and high-rises that were always a struggle to fill in the summer months when students went out of town. Head office came up with an offer that anyone who signed up for 2 years got the 4 summer months at 50% off. Sounds like a good deal. 50% rent is much better than zero. We signed tons of students. However, the lease templates that head office sent over showed that reduced rent rate on the lease, rather than just adding the discount as a separate addendum. I noticed this discrepancy and reported it, and was subsequently ignored, which meant the students were signing a legal document that guaranteed them 50% rent for 2 years. The company lost hundreds of thousands in revenue. You know, I would think that for a pretty major company, they would at least try to double-check things before they send them out. I used to work for a company that was bleeding money. In order to try and save money, they decided to stop honoring returns and refunds, but still advertised that they did. Whenever someone would ask for a refund, you were supposed to tell the person that it would be processed in the next 6 to 8 weeks, then get them off the phone. 6 to 8 weeks later, when they asked where their money is, you were supposed to apologize and say their paperwork got put in the wrong stack, and that it would be put in the correct stack and then be processed in the next 6 to 8 weeks. If they complained about the length of time, you were supposed to tell them that you can ask your supervisor to expedite it, and they should see it in 4 to 6 weeks instead. If they threatened legal action after months and months, you were supposed to tell them to contact the company legal department. We didn't have a company legal department, and then hang up on them. Then make a note in their account. No one should field calls from that account further. More than half the call center quit in a single week in protest of this decision. The company collapsed in on itself within a few months. Okay then, so I guess when you're dealing with a company that you think is completely incompetent and can never seem to get anything right, maybe some of that is just intentional. Maybe some companies are giving you the runaround just to try and get you off their back. But man, I think it's bad enough working at a regular call center, but working somewhere where you're just going to have angry people complaining to you about things that you don't want to do, that just sounds like the worst job ever. I knew this guy who wanted to start his own barbecue and hot sauce line. Here was his process. Number 1, get high with Buddy and make the decision to go into business together. Number 2, argue about who should be financing the business. 3, get a loan from Grandma. 4, order a bunch of bottles. 5, use a Sharpie and some black labels to put on the bottles. 6, fill the bottles with bulk barbecue sauce. 7, try and sell these to Walmart. 8, get upset that Walmart won't shelve your sketch sauces. 9, have several hundred bottles of unsealed product that wasn't prepared hygienically. 10, try to sell some to your extended family. 11, get angry with extended family that they don't believe in your dreams of the last 2 weeks. And 12, beg family for money to pay back Grandma. You know, to all the people that are really serious about starting a business, but everyone's telling you, like, oh, come on, like 80% of businesses fail within the first year or something. I think that something like this might make you feel a little better, that so many businesses fail because so many people are just completely clueless of what they're doing. My late great uncle started a fish and chips restaurant. He had his own unique recipe for the fish, and it was very popular. Businessmen had offered him thousands in cash for it over the years, but he always declined. After about 40 or so years, he decided to retire and hand the business over to an ambitious, recent college grad. He offered to give her the recipe and even volunteer his services for a bit while she got comfortable in her new role as the owner. She declined both, and within a year, she was forced to sell the restaurant after coming close to declaring bankruptcy. My great uncle died and took the recipe with him to his grave. See, this is an example of what I think is so weird. Whenever a company shifts management, I think the first thing that any new management should do when they inherit a new company is go to all of the employees, ask them how things work around there, try and figure out what they do and why they do it, so that you don't just go in and start breaking things. Because it seems like so many people who get into the head of a new company think, alright, I'm in charge now, I'm going to start changing everything how I think they should be, when really you just end up ruining everything that was already working. I worked for a video store during the time Finding Nemo came out on DVD. The store I worked for got a huge fish tank put inside. It was so big that they had to shrink the game rental section. The tank had clownfish in it. The tank was also locked and we couldn't feed the fish or clean it. This was supposed to be done by someone who I never saw come in. So the tank ended up filled with a bunch of dead Nemos in a nasty tank. Needless to say, parents were very unhappy about it. The local paper did a small article about it too, which didn't help an already dying store. I had no idea what they thought an expensive fish tank would do for their business. Ah yes, we'll dump a bunch of money into a new decoration. Wait, we actually have to keep maintaining this? There was a Tex-Mex place I loved in Fairbanks, Alaska. The food wasn't great, but it was consistent and the prices were fair. Well, a new owner came in and they decided to revamp it into a fine dining steakhouse. $30 was pretty much the lowest cost you can get for an item. And this was in a neighborhood that had a substantial crime rate, and was right across the street from the bikini barista and the marijuana dispensary. I stopped going, and they went under shortly thereafter. I walked in once before the place closed down, and it was dreary and empty, and they had tried to bring some of the classics back to the menu, but it was far too late by then. You were too good for this world, Los Amigos. I guess that new owner just really had a dream that he wanted to open a steakhouse, and he didn't care where it was going to be or if it was ever going to be successful. I worked for a design/printing place for years, and the owner went from amazing idea to stupid idea on the regular basis. Don't get me wrong, the guy is a brilliant designer, totally took advantage of new tech every chance he could and made it work. But he was cheap and greedy, so he ruined what would have been lucrative long-term business relationships. So we did this huge order of promo supplies for a fairly big online casino. Huge for him. About a $20K order, with good margins, and the chance at long-term work with this company. While it was being picked up, on the spur of the moment, he decides to pad the bill by about $200. The guy picking it up was the son of the casino owner, and literally watched the boss do this while I stood at the till. The customer looks at me, smiles, and pays the bill, with a huge wad of cash, and says, "I know it's not your fault, but my family is very wealthy. We didn't get that way letting people rip us off. Tell the boss over in the corner he just screwed himself out of a lot of money, because we loved the work." And a voice meant to carry. Dang, sometimes reputation's worth a little bit more than getting a little bit more money out of a job. Panera Cares opening less than a mile from my college campus. For those who don't know, Panera Cares basically just let you order food and would list a suggested donation based on what you ordered. But ultimately it was an honor system. The cashiers would just make change for you so you could put cash in the donation box. If you can't afford a meal, it's fine to not pay, but you are supposed to volunteer to work for 2 hours to cover it. But this isn't actually required. I think generally these things are supposed to be for really affluent neighborhoods where people probably donate even more than is suggested. But students from the college basically turned it into a real-life tragedy of the commons experiment. There was almost never bread available because everyone would just take it. The lines were insane and people would donate like $1 if anything. It closed within a year. Yeah, there's a good reason places like this don't really ever pop up anywhere. I know there's so many people that like to believe that, oh, all people are really good inside, and everyone will be very honest and pay what they owe. But, no. All it takes is a few bad apples to just completely tear something like that down. Circuit City was pretty stupid. When the recession hit, they decided to stop selling appliances and instead focus on DVDs and televisions and such. Appliances are known as being a recession-proof item. People always need refrigerators and microwaves. They don't need DVDs. They also wanted to cut down on labor costs, so they fired a lot of managers and assistant managers, and just left a lot of entry-level employees because they were cheaper to pay. Well, entry-level employees don't really know how to fully run a store, so pretty much every Circuit City became dog crap. You know, I never really followed why Circuit City disappeared, but that would make sense. Hopefully this is a lesson to entry-level employees as to why they don't get paid as much as the managers sometimes. 20th Century Fox giving George Lucas the merchandising rights and rights to the sequels for Star Wars in exchange for a pay cut on his director's fee, from $500,000 to $150,000. I wonder how that went. Didn't Star Wars take off a little bit? I think they made some money off of that franchise. So he probably made back that $350,000 at least. A radio station I used to listen to recently changed their format from 80% music, 20% talk shows, to 100% talk show. Then they were like, oh, you can still listen to music, but it's only going to be on our app. I honestly think it's kind of weird that radio stations are even still relevant, even in the music or the talk show categories. Because, I mean, everyone has access to pretty much all of the music in the world on their phones, and so pretty much everybody's just plugging in their own music. So why do radio stations need to really play anything? I guess just to show you new music you haven't heard before. But then when it comes to talk shows, yeah, I suppose it's just another way of doing like YouTube channels, but for radio. But I mean, this post doesn't actually say what happened to the radio station after they did this, so who knows, maybe they did better afterwards. This one involves my dad. Back in the 80s, he decided he wanted to teach people how to use a Lotus 123, Excel, MS Word, etc. So he bought a bunch of computers for a classroom, and he wrote interactive learning programs and printed out manuals and such. Even without advertising, he had people asking to join his class, but he was never quite ready. This Lotus 123 program could use more work. He wasn't ready for a class. This MS Word tutorial isn't quite done. The perfectionist in him just wouldn't let him expose the less than perfect programs in class to people. Just yet. He turned down paying customers for fear that it wasn't just perfect. He had taken a loan out from a friend to finance this, but he never made a dime. He paid back the loan by selling our cottage, something he regrets to this day. And why? Because he was afraid to be flawed. That taught me a lesson though. As the old saying goes, perfect is the enemy of done. He could have easily made money and taught his classes, refining the programs to student feedback. He could have covered deficiencies by teaching in person. He was afraid it wasn't perfect, so it was never done. We don't talk about it, or the cottage that we built together. We had the foundation and the structures built by pros, then the whole family pitched in to build the interior when we were teens. It saddens me more because it was what he wanted to do, and he went for it, but not quite. Man, this almost sounds like too much of a perfect story to be real. I guess I don't really need to throw in any moral of the stories because they were all included in the story. Let's just move on. My old company was internationally known in our industry as being one of the ideal places to be. We could hire basically anyone in the world in our space to move and work in our office. The CEO decided to cash out when a larger company barely related to our industry decided to buy us. The new company basically gutted everything that made it great, then rushed to go public. The employee stock options were pennies, and they drastically cut benefits. Every time there was a complaint, the answer was, maybe you don't understand our vision, or, well, we are a public company now. They also got rid of our office, which was located in one of the hottest LA neighborhoods that everybody loved. More than half of the OG senior members have left, and a large number of others are rumored to leave. I was forced to start assisting in hiring, and it was grueling. People would apply believing it was our old company, then find out what's up and go elsewhere. Oh, and the stock is plummeting. I hate the fact that what once was is over. Those idiots ruined something great. You know, this sounds a lot like Blizzard Entertainment. I mean, the details don't quite match Blizzard, but it is pretty sad when you've got such an awesome company just go down the drain. Around last year, this time of year, I know someone in their early 50s that sold all of their investments at a significant dip from the highs, and decided to start producing and selling hand sanitizers in little bottles out of their garage, seeing it as a big opportunity with the virus. They spent everything on the bottles, labels, plastic drums full of sanitizer at a huge markup, hiring local people to fill the bottles and put the labels on, and then a website. By the time they had inventory, they realized that they couldn't compete on price with places like Walmart or other big box stores that had finally caught up on the shortages by midsummer. They also didn't realize that selling on Amazon was gated for that category, so you had no chance of selling through there as a new seller. So now basically they have a garage full of old hand sanitizer and no savings. Yeah, it's kind of weird to me that people dive headfirst into something like this without actually planning ahead, or even looking at what they're going to have to go through in the future. Like, at least do some research before you start something like this. I worked at Hollywood Video from 2006 to 2009. At that time, Netflix was growing by leaps and bounds, and our revenue was dwindling from year to year. Instead of copying Netflix's model and using their more recognizable brand name to edge them out of business, Hollywood shrugged their shoulders and continued renting single DVDs for $4.99 for 3 days plus late fees. Where are they at now? You know, if you have a lot of interest in the whole story of like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video going out of business, you should look up Company Man's video. It's kind of interesting. It's not as cut and dry as a lot of people think. It wasn't just Blockbuster sitting back as Netflix took over and they're like, oh, well, guess we're done now. A game shop in my area had a great business plan. They had regular tournaments and games and a sweet membership plan. $10 per month and you could get a discount on tournaments as well as a $10 gift card. Essentially, it's just incentivized every single person who went there for any sort of event to spend a minimum of $10 per month. They did great for about 2 years and then decided to change the membership so that you no longer got the $10 gift card, and the store started prioritizing D&D groups over competitive gaming groups. This isn't bad in theory, aside from the fact that D&D players weren't paying for their entry, and they tended to spend less money. So they essentially chased away the customers who spent the most while removing the incentive for anyone to subscribe. The number of customers they had per day did slightly increase, but the amount they were spending on average dropped significantly, and they went out of business shortly after. Man, I'd love to see game shops move towards having more like community events where video game players can come together and compete. I mean, everyone talks about GameStop going out of business because all they do is sell hard copies of games, which nobody really needs anymore. But what people do need is to get out of their house and talk to people again. AT&T bought Warner Media for $80 billion in 2016 just to sell it for $40 billion now. Buy high, sell low. Hey, that's a good strategy you can learn over at Wall Street Bets. Two members of the band Steppenwolf wanted to break away from the founder John Kay and wanted to tour using the band name. John Kay told them he wouldn't allow it, only if he signed over their royalties from the song writing credits that they had in the band. These two members were convinced they would be successful on their own, so they agreed. Since Steppenwolf without John Kay would be like the Rolling Stones without Mick Jagger, this version of the band flopped tremendously. Also, even a 5-year-old could tell that you giving up your royalties on major hits like Born to be Wild and Magic Carpet Ride would be a really stupid thing to do. So these guys ended up just having to work regular menial jobs when they could have been getting a nice royalty check in the mail instead. Yeah, I guess it is a bit misleading when a lot of people think, oh, that band or that person is so popular, they could do anything and people would still buy it. It's not as true as a lot of people think. There was a shopping plaza near me with a fairly large gift store. Not a gift shop in the museum sense, basically like a Hallmark store but independent. It wasn't exactly bustling, but they apparently did solid business, and a lot of people in the community really appreciated having it there as a place to buy gifts and wrapping paper and such. The owners of the shopping plaza raised rent to the point that the shop goes out of business. The reason this was stupid is that the storefront sat vacant for like 15 entire years. Seriously, this place closed down when I was a child, and I'm now 27, and the vacancy was only taken over very recently. If their goal in raising the rent was to have a more profitable store move into that space, they certainly failed and missed out on decades of rent as a result. Man, who's writing this? Louise Rossman? There's a storefront in my city that opened mid-pandemic. They're a candy store. Simple enough, right? They advertise as couture luxury candy. They have a store in the most high-traffic area of the city, and therefore pay astounding rental fees. All they have is peach rings and gummy worms repackaged into glass jars with twist-off lids. Whoever decided to open this business must have no family who cared enough about them to take them aside and be like, Aunt Linda, this is a freaking stupid idea. So a lot of these stories got me thinking. You always hear about when somebody wins the lottery and they just blow all of the money, they lose it all just immediately. Generally because people who play the lottery are just terrible with money. But there are a lot of people who like to say like, oh, not me, if I won the lottery I would start a business. Therefore, I would maintain that money and actually grow it. Except that a lot of people who think they have to wait to win the lottery to start a business, they're probably people that don't know how to run a business, so they often end up just blowing it all on a failing business too. So whenever I hear about companies like these where a very ambitious person spends all their life savings on a business that just fails, it kind of reminds me of those lottery winners that think that as long as you just open a business, then that just automatically guarantees passive income. Anyways, let me know if you guys have any personal stories of bad business decisions. I've been having a hard time finding good questions of the day, but at least we finally got a longer video in.